So, what if I told you that one of the riskiest industries on the entire planet became one of the safest? And they didn't do it by inventing better machines, they did it by completely changing how people think. Today, we're going to explore the incredible lessons the business world can learn from aviation's absolute masterclass in managing risk. All right, let's just jump right in. Take a look at these numbers. Between 1989 and 2008, the aviation industry managed to slash its accident rate by a whopping 77%. Now, this wasn't just some small improvement. We're talking about a revolutionary shift that turned flying into one of the safest ways to get around, period. But here's the crazy part. While aviation was getting safer and safer, what was happening in the business world? Well, we saw catastrophic failures. Think about the 2008 financial crisis or the economic meltdown we saw with COVID. It really makes you wonder, right? What in the world does a pilot know that a CEO doesn't? Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple, but is also incredibly powerful. It all boils down to how pilots are trained to think, to prepare, and to learn. They've literally created a blueprint for safety, and honestly, it's about time the business world started taking some notes. So let's get into our first section, rethinking the human factor. For the longest time, everyone thought the key to safety was just building better planes. But the real breakthrough, it came when they started focusing on the most unpredictable part of any flight, the humans in the cockpit. At the very core of all pilot training is this idea called Aeronautical Decision-Making, or ADM for short. And this isn't some fuzzy feel-good concept. No, it's a systematic, step-by-step process for making the best call you possibly can when the pressure is on. It's a skill that's, frankly, a perfect fit for any corporate leader, but especially for someone like a chief risk officer. And here's why this is so critical. A staggering 80% of flight accidents are caused by human error. So the industry had this huge realization. Making planes safer wasn't really about better machines anymore. It was about upgrading the decision-making, basically the pilot's mental software. And just look at how perfectly this maps onto the corporate world. A pilot has to think about their own health, fatigue, their mental state. Well, a chief risk officer has to think about their team's skills and experience. A pilot checks the plane's equipment. A CRO looks at the company's operational risks. It's almost a one-to-one comparison. The parallels are just undeniable. This is one of my favorite parts. It's such a practical tool. Pilots are literally trained to spot these 5 hazardous attitudes in themselves. You know the ones that don't tell me what to do feeling or the it won't happen to me mindset. And for every single one, they have a memorized antidote, a mental check to pull themselves back from the brink. Just imagine having that kind of discipline in a high-stakes business meeting. All right, section 2, practice for disaster. So having the right mindset is absolutely crucial. It's the foundation, but it's not enough on its own. You have to actively, rigorously prepare for the worst-case scenario. Think about it. Pilots don't just cross their fingers and hope for the best. They spend hours and hours in flight simulators practicing for disaster. Engine failures, landing in a storm. They do it over and over until the right response is just pure muscle memory. The corporate world has an equivalent, running risk war games. You simulate a crisis, like a market crash or a huge product failure, to see if your so-called plan actually works under pressure. A lot of companies think that just having a bunch of cash set aside is their big safety net. But that's a totally reactive way of thinking. What aviation teaches us is to be proactive. It's not about having enough money to survive the crash. It's about having a tested, practiced plan to make sure you never crash in the first place. And this is just incredible. Get this, 99% of U.S. air carriers, these are fierce, cutthroat competitors. They voluntarily share safety data with each other. Why? Because they know that a safety problem for one airline is a potential threat to the entire system. It's how they spot those big, scary risks before they turn into a catastrophe. Just pause and think about that for a second. What if the big banks and financial firms did that? What if they all shared data on their near misses, their close calls, the times their models almost failed? You have to wonder, could that kind of collaboration have prevented something like the 2008 meltdown? Okay, let's move on to our third section, building a safety culture. Because look, all the tools and practice drills in the world don't mean much if you don't have the right culture to support them. And this is really the final piece of the puzzle. This quote here really says it all. In aviation, when something goes wrong, you don't sweep it under the rug. Failure is seen as an absolute, non-negotiable command to learn. Every single incident, no matter how minor it seems, is treated like a priceless opportunity to get better. And this culture is really built on three core pillars. First, they do these incredibly deep postmortems after any incident. Second, the regulators are proactive, using all that shared data to fix problems before they spread. And third, and this one is huge, is something called crew resource management. It basically gets rid of the strict hierarchy so that anyone on the crew, from the co-pilot to a mechanic, feels empowered to speak up and even ground a plane if they see a problem. Think about how that compares to the corporate world. How many times have you seen a serious problem get watered down as it goes up the chain of command? Well, in a true safety culture, that just doesn't happen. The culture itself demands that every single employee, at every level, is a part of managing risk. All right, Section 4, your company's flight manual. So, how do we take all of this and actually apply it? Let's bring these lessons from way up at 30,000 feet right down into the boardroom. So here it is. Let's call it your company's 4-point pre-flight check. Number 1, train your people to recognize their own human biases. Number 2, don't just have a crisis plan sitting in a binder, actually practice for disaster. 3, figure out how to share data and collaborate on the big risks. And number 4, learn from every single failure. Make postmortems deep, mandatory, and actually lead to change. And the best part about all this? It isn't some abstract theory. This is a proven, battle-tested blueprint. It was created in an industry where the stakes aren't just losing money, they're life and death. This is a system that works. So I'll just leave you with this one last question to think about. What would change in your company, in your entire industry, if we treated every corporate failure like a plane crash? With that same level of intensity, that same transparency, and that same absolute commitment to learning so it never happens again. Just think about what we could prevent.